In 1960, a man earning the median income of $5,600 could buy a house for $11,900. That's 2.1 times his annual salary. His wife could stay home. They could afford kids. They could save money. They had security. In 2024, the median household income is $74,580. The median home costs $513,100. That's 6.9 times annual income. But here's the key, that $74,580 isn't one person's income. It's two incomes combined. Both parents working full-time can't afford what one parent could easily afford in 1960. Between 1950 and 2000, women's labor force participation doubled from 33% to 60%. This was celebrated as liberation, economic independence, breaking free from domestic constraints, and in many ways it was. But there's an economic reality nobody wants to talk about. When women entered the workforce en masse, something catastrophic happened to the American middle class. Real wages have been flat since 1973. Housing costs exploded. Corporate profits surged while labor's share of income collapsed. And now, two incomes produce less economic security than one income did 60 years ago. The dual income household isn't a choice, it's a requirement. And most families are barely surviving. So here's the uncomfortable question. Did feminism accidentally destroy the middle class? Not because women working is bad, but because when women entered the workforce, the economic system adjusted in ways that trapped everyone. Wages didn't double when the workforce doubled. Instead, everything got more expensive. Corporations captured the gains, and now both parents must work just to stay afloat. Hey, I'm Brandon, and welcome back to My Money Minute. Today, we're diving into one of the most controversial economic topics of our time, the relationship between women's workforce entry and middle class decline. This isn't about blaming women. This is about understanding how labor supply doubling, combined with catastrophic policy failures, created an economic trap that destroyed the living standards our grandparents took for granted. Let's start with what actually happened. In 1950, women's labor force participation was 33.9%. By 1998, it was 59.8%. The rate nearly doubled. The biggest increase was among women aged 25 to 34. Their participation rate went from 34% in 1950 to 76.3% in 1998. That's more than a doubling in the prime working years. Today, women comprise roughly 47% of the total workforce. Prime age women, those 25 to 54, have a labor force participation rate of 77.8%, near an all-time high. And in education, women now earn 57.3% of bachelor's degrees, 62.6% of associate's degrees, and 62.8% of master's degrees. Women aren't just in the workforce, they dominate higher education. This was supposed to be economic liberation. And in many ways, it was. Women gained financial independence, career opportunities, political power through economic participation. These are real achievements that shouldn't be dismissed. But here's what nobody predicted. When women entered the workforce in massive numbers, wages didn't rise proportionally, they flatlined. After adjusting for inflation, today's average hourly wage has the same purchasing power it did in 1978. In fact, real wages peaked in January 1973 at $4.03 per hour, equivalent to $23.68 today. That was 52 years ago. From the end of World War II through the late 1970s, the US economy generated rapid wage growth that was widely shared. Since 1979, average wage growth has decelerated sharply, with the biggest declines at the bottom and middle. Between 1973 and 2013, productivity grew 74.4%. Hourly compensation grew 9.2%. Workers became massively more productive, but their pay barely moved. Let me break down what happened to different income levels between 1979 and 2019. The 10th percentile, the poorest workers, saw 3% real wage growth over 40 years. The 50th percentile, the median worker, saw 13.7% growth. The 90th percentile saw 51.8% growth. The top 1% saw 160% growth. And the top 0.1%, the ultra-rich, saw 345% growth. The gap is obscene. While the richest saw their incomes more than quadruple, median workers got a 13.7% raise spread across 4 decades. That's roughly 0.3% annual wage growth for 40 years. Essentially nothing. And college degrees didn't protect anyone. In 2013, Inflation adjusted hourly wages for young college graduates were lower than they were in the late 1990s. A 4 year degree, which now comes with crushing debt, provides no guarantee of decent wage growth. The system broke for everyone except those at the very top. Now let's talk about housing, because this is where the trap becomes undeniable. In 1960, the median home cost $11,900. Median income was $5,600. That's a price to income ratio of 2.1. One person earning the median wage could afford a house with a reasonable mortgage. By 2024, the median home is $513,100, and median household income is $74,580. That's a ratio of 6.9 to 1, and remember, that's the combined household income. Another way to measure it, in the 1960s, it would take approximately 4.4 years of the average annual wage to purchase an average house. As of 2024, it takes 7.6 years. Housing became 73% less affordable relative to income. And remember, that's household income? Two people working? In 1960, one income could buy the house. In 2024, two incomes combined struggle to afford it. Using a ratio of 3 to 1 as the affordability threshold, 68 out of 100 Americans could afford to buy a home in 1960. Today, only 43 out of 100 can. In the West specifically, median home prices increased 195% since the 1960s. Median household income increased 26%. Home prices grew 7.5 times faster than income. This isn't a minor adjustment. This is structural unaffordability. And this created a fundamental shift in how banks approach lending. Before 1970, mortgages were qualified based on a single income, typically 2.5 to 3 times annual salary maximum. By the 1980s, dual income qualification became standard. Banks adjusted lending standards upward as two incomes became normal. This created a feedback loop. To afford a house, you need two incomes. To justify two incomes, you need the services that allow both parents to work: childcare, prepared meals, housekeeping. Those services cost money, reducing the benefit of the second income. Let me show you where the money went while wages stagnated. Between 2000 and 2015, the share of corporate income that went to workers' wages declined from 82.3% to 75.5%. That's a 6.8 percentage point decline. If labor's share hadn't fallen, employees in the corporate sector would have $535 billion more in their paychecks. That's more than $500 billion transferred from workers to capital. Looking longer term, the portion of national income received by workers fell from 64.5% in 1974 to 56.8% in 2017. Workers' share of the economy dropped by nearly 8 percentage points. Where did that money go? Corporate profits. From 1950 to 1970, the profit share bounced around 16% of GDP. After 2000, it surged to around 22%. Corporate profits as a share of national income increased by more than a third. And post-COVID, it's even worse. Profits averaged 13.9% of national income from 2010 to 2019. As of late 2024, they were 16.2%. Corporations are capturing more of national income while workers get less. Now, you might be thinking, surely unions protected workers through this period. No, unions collapsed. In 1983, the first year comparable data is available, union membership was 20.1% of wage and salary workers. By 2024, it's 9.9%. In the private sector specifically, it's 5.9%, the lowest in over a century. And union decline didn't just hurt union members, it suppressed wages for everyone. In 1973, union members earned 40% more per hour than non-members. By 2023, that premium had fallen to 20%. Research shows that if union density had remained at late 1970s levels, non-union men would be earning about $52 more per week on average today. Unions declined because of deliberate policy choices. The Taft-Hartley Act in 1947 weakened union rights by outlawing many strikes and permitting right-to-work laws. The Reagan era brought active hostility to organized labor. Union density has consistently declined for 5 decades because of an intentional political effort to suppress workers' wage growth and shift income to profits and executives by stripping away the most important leverage workers had, the right to bargain collectively. So let's connect the pieces. Women's workforce participation doubled from 1950 to 2000. During that exact same period, wages stagnated starting in 1973. Housing costs exploded, corporate profits surged, union power collapsed, labor's share of income fell dramatically. Now, here's the critical question: did women entering the workforce cause wage stagnation? The answer is complicated. Labor economics has a basic principle: when supply increases and demand stays constant, price falls. The workforce effectively doubled. If labor demand didn't double proportionally, then wages would fall or stagnate. That's Econ 101. But the timing doesn't perfectly align. Women were entering the workforce gradually from the 1950s onward. The sharpest increase was 1960s to 1970s, but wage stagnation began specifically in 1973, tied to the oil shock, monetary policy changes, and the end of the Bretton Woods system. Union decline accelerated in the 1970s to 1980s. The profit surge began in the 1980s after unions were already weakened. This suggests that women's entry didn't directly cause wage stagnation. Multiple other factors were at work: globalization and offshoring that moved manufacturing jobs overseas, automation that reduced demand for certain types of labor, policy failures, including Federal Reserve choices to prioritize low inflation over full employment, the minimum wage frozen since 2009, and corporate strategy shifts in the 1980s that deliberately prioritized profit over labor. But here's where it gets complicated. Even if women's entry didn't cause wage stagnation, the interaction between doubled labor supply and suppressed wages created a trap. Women entered the workforce seeking economic independence and found that wages were being suppressed across the board. Meanwhile, housing costs exploded, not because of feminism, but because of zoning laws, land use policy, and speculation. The result? Two-income households became necessary just to maintain the living standard that one income provided in 1960. And this necessity created entirely new markets that extract wealth from dual-income households. Childcare is now a $60+ billion market that essentially didn't exist in 1960. Families spend $1,500 to $3,000 per month on childcare. That's $18,000 to $36,000 per year. After taxes, food delivery services like DoorDash and Instacart, meal kit subscriptions, housekeeping services, laundry services, professional wardrobe styling, these industries exist in large part because dual-income households don't have time to do these things themselves. The paradox is striking. Dual-income households have higher gross income but often save less as a percentage than single-income households did in 1960. After childcare, commuting costs, higher taxes from combined income, and purchasing services they don't have time to do themselves, many dual-income households save only 3 to 5% combined. Single-income households in 1960 could save 10 to 15% on one income. Two people working full-time, earning more nominal dollars than their grandparents, with less economic security and lower savings rates. That's not progress. That's a trap. And women face additional burdens that men don't. Women hold nearly two-thirds of the country's $1.54 trillion in student debt, $929 billion. As of 2024, 63.6% of all student loan debt belongs to women. The average student debt for women is $31,700. Why? Multiple factors. Women earn 58.5% of bachelor's degrees, 62.6% of associate's degrees, and 62.8% of master's degrees. They attend college at higher rates. They pursue graduate degrees more frequently, and graduate programs account for 40% of federal student loans issued each year despite representing a smaller portion of students. Women also attend for-profit colleges at higher rates, 63% of for-profit students versus 55% at public four-year colleges. For-profit tuition averages $16,000 compared to $8,000 at public colleges. The debt repayment gap is devastating. Women take about 2 years longer than men to repay student loans. 12 years after graduation, white men have paid off 44% of their debt. White women have paid off only 28%. Black women see their debt increase by 13% over 12 years due to interest. They owe more a decade after graduating than when they started. Why? Women have a median annual salary of $50,770 after graduation, 89.3% of what men earn. The average monthly student debt payment for women is $307, representing 10.4% of monthly expenses excluding childcare. This creates a vicious trap. Women need more education to close the wage gap. More education means more debt. The wage gap persists anyway. Debt service consumes a larger portion of income because of lower earnings. It's a cycle that compounds over decades. And all of this happens while women are supposed to be liberated by workforce participation. But liberation means having choices. If you must work because one income can't support a family and you're drowning in student debt, and childcare costs consume most of your second income, and housing is unaffordable even with two salaries, is that really liberation? Or is it just a different kind of trap? If wages had kept pace with productivity, if the 74.4% productivity increase from 1973 to 2013 had translated to 74.4% wage increases instead of 9.2%, dual income households would be wealthy. If housing policy had kept homes affordable relative to income, two incomes would provide genuine security instead of barely scraping by. If childcare was subsidized like it is in other developed countries, the second income would actually improve family finances instead of mostly covering childcare costs. None of these policy failures were inevitable. They were choices. Union decline was a policy choice. Taft-Hartley, right-to-work laws, Reagan-era hostility, wage suppression was a choice. Corporations and executives prioritized profits and stock buybacks over worker compensation. Housing unaffordability was a choice. Zoning laws, land use restrictions, treating homes as investment vehicles instead of places to live. The lack of childcare support was a choice. Other countries subsidize it heavily. The US doesn't. What should have happened is this. Women enter workforce, labor supply doubles, wages stay high because unions maintain bargaining power, housing remains affordable through smart policy, and dual income households achieve significantly higher living standards with the option for one parent to stay home if desired. That's what a functioning system would have produced. What actually happened? Women enter workforce, wages stagnate due to union decline and policy failures, housing costs explode, childcare becomes crushingly expensive, corporate profits surge, and dual income becomes mandatory just to survive. The difference between those two outcomes isn't feminism, it's decades of policy choices that prioritize capital over labor. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Regardless of why it happened, the outcome is clear. The middle class has been devastated. In 1960, one income could buy a house, support a family, save for retirement, and provide security. In 2024, two incomes struggle to achieve the same. That's not progress. That's collapse disguised as liberation. And the future looks worse. Birth rates have collapsed because dual income households delay childbearing or skip it entirely due to financial pressure. When they do have children, they have fewer. This creates a demographic time bomb for Social Security and Medicare, which were designed assuming a single earner model with many workers supporting fewer retirees. The pension system collapsed. In the 1970s, defined benefit pensions were common. By the 2000s, we shifted to 401ks, where individuals bear all market risk. Wall Street profited enormously from managing these accounts while workers took on the risk of market crashes devastating their retirement savings. Most workers are severely underfunded for retirement. Gen Z and millennials face the worst situation in modern American history. Housing costs 3 to 3.5 times what their parents faced relative to income. Student debt burdens are massive, especially for women. Both parents must work, but still can't afford a house. Retirement savings are minimal relative to needs. Family formation is delayed or abandoned entirely because it's financially impossible. This is the economic disaster we're not supposed to talk about. The dual income household was sold as liberation and empowerment. And for some women, it genuinely was. But for the majority, it became an economic necessity that provides less security than their grandmothers had with one income and no college degree. The system isn't rigged against women specifically or for them. It's rigged for capital over labor. Women's liberation happened, partially with ongoing issues around discrimination and the wage gap, but simultaneously, policy failures suppressed wages for everyone. Housing became unaffordable, corporate profits surged, unions collapsed, and two incomes became necessary just to survive. If this was really about liberation, dual income would be optional. Families could choose whether one parent stays home based on preference, not financial desperation. Women could pursue careers without being forced into them by economic necessity. Housing would be affordable on one income, luxurious on two. Childcare would be subsidized, so the second income actually improves living standards instead of just covering childcare costs. Instead, we have a system where both parents work full-time, earn more nominal dollars than ever, drown in debt, can't afford housing, save almost nothing, and have less economic security than single-income households in 1960. That's not liberation. That's exploitation dressed up with feminist rhetoric. And the people who benefit? Corporations that captured all the productivity gains, banks that issue mortgages at 6.9 times income instead of 2.1 times, childcare providers charging $36,000 per year, student loan servicers collecting interest on $1.54 trillion in debt, landlords who've watched rents skyrocket because dual income households can pay more. The economic disaster of feminism isn't that women work. It's that women were told working would bring liberation, and instead they found themselves trapped in a system that requires two incomes to achieve what one income easily provided 60 years ago. The promise was freedom. The reality is a treadmill running faster just to stay in place. Women entering the workforce should have doubled household prosperity. Instead, it barely maintained survival. That's not a triumph. That's a tragedy. Thank you for watching my Money Mint. If this breakdown of how the dual income trap destroyed middle-class economics got you thinking, smash that subscribe button. Let me know in the comments. Do you think dual income households are liberation or economic necessity? I'll see you in the next one.